Brothers and sisters, I'm going to speak this morning on the other gospel reading for today, which we didn't hear, but it's one that's very familiar to you, and it's about the account of the centurion who came to Jesus asking for Jesus to heal his servant, who was very ill. And as I was reading this gospel, I was thinking, can you think of a situation where Jesus would have been surprised at something? It's hard to think of that. We know Jesus experienced a range of human emotions, but surprise does not seem to be one that I would attribute to him. I mean, how can you be surprised when you know everything, right? And yet in this gospel reading, it says Jesus marveled at the faith of the centurion. Assuredly, I say to you, I've not found such great faith, he says, not even in Israel. So this centurion had come, Jesus was in Capernaum, and he said, Lord, my servant is lying at home paralyzed, he's dreadfully tormented, and Jesus said, I will come and heal him. And the centurion says, Lord, I'm not worthy for you to come under my roof. Just say the word, and my servant will be healed. That's a remarkable degree of faith, right? From a man who was a Roman. He wasn't even, an Israeli citizen. And yet Jesus marvels here at this man's faith. Maybe not so much in the sense of surprise as more impressed, right? He was impressed with the faith of this centurion. And what makes this act of faith more impressive is that it is not one of Jesus' disciples, not even one of his own people, but a Roman, a leader, in fact, of Roman troops, a man who was an official of what the Jews would think of as the evil Roman Empire, whose background was paganism. And yet he is identified by Jesus as a man of great faith. I think of this when I remember St. Peter when he was preaching, and he makes this comment in one of his sermons in Acts. He says, in truth I perceive that God shows no partiality, but in every nation, whoever fears him and works righteousness is accepted by him. And again, think about that. It doesn't matter to Jesus what a person's nationality is, what their background, what their ethnic identity. What matters is that everyone who fears God and works righteousness. And that's, I think, what we're seeing here with this centurion. You see, it doesn't matter what nation a person is from or lives in. In fact, the prophet Isaiah tells us that in God's eyes, all of the nations are counted as nothing, as spittle, as a drop in the bucket. That's not what matters. What matters to be accepted by Jesus, to follow Jesus, is in every nation, whoever fears him and works righteousness is accepted by him. And that's what we're seeing here in this account with the centurion. This man was from a pagan nation, and yet Jesus commends his faith because of his working righteousness and his fearing God. Even though he was a man of great authority, he knew his place before God. The centurion, you remember in the gospel, he says, I command this servant to do this, and I command this soldier to do that. In other words, he was a man of great authority. He had great authority as a centurion. And yet he knew his place. He knew that he was also one under authority. He recognized that every person, no matter how important or powerful, is under authority. So he approaches the Lord with humility, and yet with confidence in the Lord's power. He came not with presumption, but with boldness. His faith was great because he fully trusted the voice of God. Now again, this lesson that everybody, no matter who we are, everyone is under authority. There's a great story I read a while back about Christian Hester. He was the governor of Massachusetts in the 50s. And he was campaigning at a church potluck. And as he was going through the food line, he came to the server, this lady who was serving chicken, and she put a piece of chicken on his plate, and he said, "Can I have another piece?" And she said, "Well, no, we're only having one piece per person until everybody is served." And he said, "I really want another piece." He said, "But maybe you don't know who I am." He says, "I'm the governor of Massachusetts." To which the server responded, "Well, sir, maybe you don't know who I am. I'm the lady in charge of the chicken." Everyone, no matter who you are, is under authority. The centurion respected the Lord's authority and power. He said to Jesus, "Just say the word. Just say the word, and I know my servant can be healed." This is the kind of follower of Christ we are called to be. A follower who trusts Jesus to just say the word. Do we have that kind of faith that the centurion had? Do we believe that Jesus has the power to take care of us no matter what problems, what challenges we face in life? Last week, Father Timothy in his homily spoke about Jesus' Sermon on the Mount, where Jesus talks about not worrying. Don't worry about anything, what you should wear, eat, drink, or put on. And it was a great lesson for us, because how much of our lives do we spend worrying rather than trusting, right? There's only three things that we worry about. Everything that has happened, everything that's happening now, and everything that will happen, right? But that is such a waste of time when we could be praying and trusting God to take care of us as he said he would. I remember years ago, a good friend of mine was having just he was really worried about some real difficulties he was facing in his life. And he was going on about how anxious he was about it and so on. And I said, have you prayed about this? And his comment was, "Really? Has it come to that?" And I said, "Brother, it had come to that a long time ago. Why do we make prayer our last resort when it should be the first thing that we do when we're facing troubles?" Right? That's what it means to trust the Lord. The centurion fully trusted Christ. He had not received a lot of divine revelation, but what life that he had received really influenced his life. St. John Chrysostom said that even though the centurion did not receive Jesus into his home, he received him into his heart. And one more evidence of this centurion's faith I thought was rather remarkable is that he was a man who loved. He loved not only toward his servant, and really how many men in a position of authority that as he was would have cared so much about his servant. But he loved even this servant of his. We don't know how many servants he had, but he knew that he had love for this one. And not only that, but he loved even his enemies. In Luke's gospel, when he writes about this account, he gives us a little more detail. He says that there were elders of the Jews who also came to Jesus pleading on behalf of the centurion, and they came to Jesus, they begged him, saying that the centurion for whom he should do this was deserving, for he loves our nation and has even built us a synagogue. Here, this Roman centurion, his enemies were supposed to be, enemies of the Jews, yet he had built them a synagogue. Now think about that. That is really love in action, loving even for enemies. There's a story of a monk who found a precious stone, a precious jewel, and he kept it quietly in his bag. And a short time later, he met a traveler who said that he was hungry and asked the monk if he could share some of his provisions. And the monk said, "Well, I don't really have anything except this precious stone." And he gave it to the traveler. And the traveler responded, he said, "What I really want is that which enabled you to give me this precious stone." That's what we want, right? That kind of faith, that kind of love and humility. Lord, grant us the grace to have the faith of the centurion. In the bulletin this week, if you read it, Father Timothy quotes from the elder Paisios, the Athonite. He says, the grace of God envelops the person who is humble. If we want to have God's grace, we must rid ourselves of selfishness, pride, jealousy, and vanity. Humility is the key to cleansing ourselves of all these bad qualities. The Centurion is our model of humility, our model of faith and of unselfish love. As St. Peter says in his first epistle, all of you, clothe yourselves with humility toward one another, because God is opposed to the proud, but he gives grace to the humble. Christ is in our midst.